Welcome to the Head Shepherd podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO here at Next Gen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, thank you to our two fantastic sponsors for continuing to sponsor this podcast. MSD Animal Health is perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia and for their Allflex range across the world, with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Heineken is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Heineken team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. This week we thought we'd actually have a chat about my trip to Ontario. Sophie and I were having a bit of a yarn about it, and we thought, well, we may as well press record and let the listeners listen along as well. So Sophie and I here sitting with a mic each, chatting about Ontario. I was there for 10 or 11 days, put plenty of socials up, so anyone that was following would have seen plenty of images and stuff. But it was a great experience. Was there at a great time of the year in terms of autumn leaves and all that stuff to look at. And I guess probably on reflection, like very different environment, very different production systems, but I don't know, when you're sitting around in a hotel room as the clock strikes 12 and it's just the same as if you're in Australia or New Zealand, great people that farm sheep all over the world, it seems.
Yeah, it's the joy of it, really. Like I spent a short time in Canada and they're as close to Kiwis as you're going to get. So, yeah, but I thought we'll start with the start and why you were invited over and who invited you over. So
the Ontario Sheep Farmers is I guess an advocacy group, or they sort of, an industry group that are tasked with sort of promoting the industry and helping those within it across Ontario. So Anita O'Brien, actually, as a listener, hopefully she's listening along today, she was the one that suggested to Erin Morgan, who's the executive director at Ontario Sheep Farmers, to look me up. And so there was a couple of jobs. One was to critique 3 different businesses, their sort of breeding strategies, which is always a bit, confronting in front of 150 people talking about someone else's business. But I guess that's kind of what we do, so that's fine. And then a presentation as well, a keynote on profitability in sheep. I also spoke to the large flock operators group the morning before that, which was a group of, I think their cutoff is 650 maybe sheep, and so a lot of those are actually grazing outdoors, whereas a lot of others are also always indoors and outdoors people in that group. But I guess they're the more that are primarily doing sheep production without other parts. Well, they'll have other parts of the business as well, but are genuinely producing sheep as for profit. And then that goes across the group. There's a range from those with a small number of sheep through to those that have a combination of other incomes. I guess like lots of places in Australia and New Zealand where sheep don't pay all the bills. So they were the kind of core things to do. But to do that, had the great opportunity to jump in the car. I went to 14 different farms. So Erin was kindly chauffeured me around, and so literally got off the plane at 10:30 at night after the longest Thursday of my life, and then I think 7 o'clock that next morning we're off and ended up on 2 islands that first day. So. Which was pretty cool. So the first one was like a boat out to see the sheep, and the second one a ferry out to see the sheep. But and then we went from there. Pretty much, it was pretty similar to a next gen trip. There wasn't a lot of downtime. It was get in the car and go, and which is good. Like we like to get a lot done in a day.
I suppose we could either run, a quick farm by farm or breed by breed. I mean, you saw so much. You had people in barns, you saw milking sheep, Suffolks, boats to sheep grazing crop, corn. It's,
Yeah, I guess what I'm amazed by was the number of ways you can do corn. So everyone, there's like, I don't know, 8 different ways you can feed corn. So obviously corn grain, and then there was corn cob silage. That's where they take, harvest just the corn cob and then grind just the cob into so it got the moisture obviously before it's dried, and then ensile that, and so that's quite a good feed, quite a good balanced feed. There's obviously corn silage or whole crop silage that we'd be used to, and then sort of 2 versions of that, one more green than the other, and then distiller's grain, which is corn with the obviously starch removed through distillation, and so that's actually high protein. I think it sits at sort of 22% protein and quite good fat, so it's quite a good creep feed and really good lamb tucker. And then what else we got? Then we saw a couple of people grazing whole crop corn. So you sort of start off before the cob is fully formed, and so they're sort of grazing, I guess like our normal sort of break freak grazing you're doing in New Zealand, and then by the end of it, as the corn's maturing, they're only eating the cob. And yeah, I've never seen sheep demolish something so quickly as jumping in a crop of whole corn and they know they've got to push it down to get to the cob. So that was pretty interesting. But I guess that's more normal how we would handle how we would feed off forages, I suppose. But yeah, definitely. Obviously, land is at a premium, expensive land often, and yeah, cash cropping. So soybeans and corn being for ethanol production as well as stock feed. So there's pressure on grazing. We saw, but then there's a few people who are pasture based, and yeah, I guess you kind of think, it's going to be similar to NZ, but a lot of these areas go from sort of minus 30 winters through to kind of plus 30 and humid summers, and so pasture growth goes from zero for a long period of time to like 200 kilos a day. So like the ability to stock to that, to have enough animals to eat, to get through the winter, but then be able to eat that amount of feed is obviously impossible. So yeah, it's quite a challenge to handle that.
A gauge on how cold was you saying that, you were getting a boat out to these sheep on lakes, and in winter the lakes just froze up entirely. Yeah. You could walk over them.
Yeah.
Like imagine if, Queenstown or, Tekapo froze. Solid.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like these lakes are like these are the Great Lakes. These are enormous, and those things can freeze completely, which just blows my mind. Or not completely, I suppose the top freeze enough to be able to drive on for big chunks of it. And that, so the first island we went to, which was Matt and Liz's, and I don't know if they own all the island, but a big chunk of it anyway. So they obviously boat over in the summer, but then can four-wheeler, like you can drive on top of it over there in the winter, but which has some bonuses. But he talked about how like sometimes if it's sort of starting to melt, you can kind of see a bit of a wave forming in the ice as you're driving in the four-wheeler, and I don't think that's something I'd want to see. That's not something I want to
So do they have sheep outside in this? Like, are they all out? Are some of them outside in winter?
Yeah.
What do they do about feeding in the snow?
So that's, I guess, ice and feeding on top of snow, basically. Yeah. So and
just feeding out those silages they're making.
Silage and that sort of stuff. So yeah. So that's a small number that would feed through the winter. But yeah, basically, I guess more like a Kiwi winter, but minus 25 degrees or minus further 30 degrees cooler. But feeding some of those high energy, I guess high energy corn and stuff to keep things ticking over. A lot of like it seems insane, but they seem to be able to do it, and then get them out onto the pasture as you start to thaw out and things start to grow.
I know that there's quite a few Canadians that do sort of accelerated lambing and whatnot. Like production wise, how comparable was it to here?
Yeah, so your pasture based folks are more single, like one lambing, and then as you go into intensive, like a lot of farms that sheep don't go outside at all, or sort of go out into yards, close to outside yards, but not too far away. They're then into accelerated systems, so quite high fecundity levels. So the Rito Arcot, which is a Canadian developed breed, which has got Finnan, Friesian, and random stuff in there. But yeah, I guess selected for high fecundity, lots of multiples. So some of those doing kind of 3 lambs per ewe, like 300% lambing, and then obviously the fall lambing, which is so the spring lambing they do that, and then the fall lambing is a bit less as you get the photo period working against you. But they'll be sort of accelerated, like some on the 5-star system, some on other variations of just kind of always thinking like of them. Some of them lamb 5-6 times a year, obviously not the same sheep, but so it's kind of it's all intense. And I guess which is sort of it's obviously hard to work out in your head how that all works, but I guess once you've got a sheep and you're going to feed it everything it needs, it may as well either be pregnant or lactating. It's kind of the theory. So
how old are they weaning over there?
Quite early, so more 50, 60 days. Like 50 days, I think is probably, I don't know what the average was, to be honest. But but certainly weaning young, like they'll particularly those indoor systems will have like a creep available from a couple of weeks old, and so the animals are already kind of on the grain and then weaned and then stuck, and obviously just bore further corn into them. Quite fast growth for like the genetics probably aren't super growthy from what I can work out through a few sites that have been used and looking up their data, but probably comparable to New Zealand, but not comparable to Australian sort of terminals. And but still getting some really good growth rates through concentrated feeding. Obviously, big issues with worms. There's not a lot of actives available, or a lot. Yeah, I guess what I quickly realised is how many things that we have that they don't have, through veterinary products, drenches, vaccinations, a range of things, and kind of started off sort of commenting about, it'd be better if you had this and this and this, but quickly realised that that's not very helpful to people to tell them stuff that they can't have because of obviously market size. People aren't willing to go through the approvals process for small markets. Like your big corporations need to sell stuff. So a lot of, which is a bit limiting, but I think, I guess what I took away from that is that genetics is going to be sort of number 1, 2, and 3 on the solutions list for a lot of their problems, because if you don't have the chemicals or the vaccinations or whatever, then you're going to have to select for the resistant ones. So Barber's Pole, big battle in those. Yeah, so anyone grazing outdoors obviously can get a fair load up of larvae, and then that, obviously without appropriate treatments can cause a fair bit of grief. Coccidia are the other parasitic problem. And that, like, getting outbreaks in barns was like one of the, I think, probably saying coccidia out loud amongst an Ontario sheep farmer sends a shiver down their spine. I think that's probably their number one concern. And I was there in in fall, autumn, and a really good week, 16, 17 degrees and blue sky, lovely. And everyone was telling me how lucky I was. At the time, it was actually snowing back in New Zealand, which was both out of season. Yeah, so you can imagine that some of those barns get quite like cold and humid and wet and damp, and imagine that there's some health. Well, there are some health issues associated with that.
Yeah. So we'll finish that production and then we'll talk about genetics. So, like, how heavy are they finishing them? What money are they getting for the lambs over there? Out
to 100, 110 pounds. So I had to do the 2.2 conversion flat out all the time. So sort of a 25 kilo carcass is the sort of aim for most people. Some a few a bit lighter. The one processor that presented at the convention was, I think they sort of capped it at 27. You wouldn't get paid any more over 27 kilos. Yeah, so fast growth or pushed to that. Some sold direct, a lot sold through what they call sale barns, so sale yards, and all entire. Some males with tails on, but no males, well, not many males castrated, which I'll talk about before the podcast is out. And so that most people were sort of no real, I guess, not the structure that you've got here. So not that great availability to sell store lambs or whatever. Like most people are finishing. Some of the pasture guys had a sort of custom feeders that would take them from them, but a lot of people were sort of taking everything through to finished product, just on the scale of things. And I mean, the price, I think it's kind of dependent on, obviously it fluctuates a bit, but they were kind of over $10 a kilo Canadian, so probably more like 12. So 300, like a 25 kilo carcass making sort of 300 Canadian, which is whatever that is, 360, 370, 380 or something. So plenty of high value lamb. So I guess that kind of explains how you can go intensive if you're getting that sort of price. Even mutton was like, there wasn't much depreciation on mutton. They were getting that similar sort of money, or even better. So
their input costs obviously considerably higher with the barns and stuff. But even still, that's a nice pretty penny or pretty cent.
So it's So I think it. I mean, I don't. Yeah, there's not. Yeah, I think it obviously the combination of of the feeding and that price meant that profitability probably ends up being similar to what we are. Not sure. Obviously, didn't get into that level of detail. But the other thing I just want to mention on production is quite a few grazing under solar panels. So Chris Moore, Lindsay Smith, and a few others we caught up with were grazing under solar panels. So in that model, you get paid for taking the grass away, and obviously the sheep are a bit of a bonus. Sounds like a perfect model. There is challenges with that because you've got to obviously break fence through panels and shift stuff around panels, and there's no water on a lot of those panels areas and stuff. So kind of a fair bit of work. Well, there's a lot of work, but you get the benefit of, I guess, paid to graze it as well. But I think that's going to be a big opportunity across most of our production areas, like for those areas that where panels are going in. There's a lot of pasture underneath the panels. Yeah, and yeah, the big production challenge was coyotes or coyotes, depending on which person you ask, because those things, will kill any age, any class of stock. And yeah, the challenge with grazing outside is, both the winter, but more often is the dogs or the coyote, sorry.
It makes New Zealand seem so easy.
One thing I did probably challenge a bit and have since in my head at least is how many rams went out. Like there's lots of, because people had rams, they kind of put them all out across ewes. And I think, there's definitely over ram use, as in lots, like down to probably, I don't know, 1 ram per 20 ewes often. And I mean, they're all in close proximity. We know that a ram in New Zealand will get 100, 120 ewes on a hill, let alone in a yard where they can see everyone. So, I think the kind of concept was that a ram can only handle a few ewes a day, like 2 or 3 ewes a day, whereas we know that's higher than that. So, I think everyone's going, it doesn't matter, we've got the rams anyway, but the genetic merit of all those rams isn't equal. So if you've only used the top 3 rather than the top 15, it means your genetic gain, like your selection intensity goes up, your average genetic merit goes up, and your genetic gain should go up. So, I think there's definite scope there to reduce the number of rams used and sort of that. I mean, I think there's a bit of an excuse that you just chuck them all in because then you don't have to worry about feeding that ram pen at the moment because they're all in the ewes. But I think that I reckon there'll be some lost opportunity there.
So we'll get on to genetics, I guess. That's what we're all here for. You saw quite a few sheep breeds if you've been following Ferg's social media. I suppose what you observed, I guess, of how they're managing their genetics over there and the potential, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess that, I mean, it's easier for me to comment on genetics than production because the production variation is like it's so different. And I think they've got, they've great sort of care around their nutrition and stuff. So I think that bit, there wasn't a lot to say. But genetics, I think there's still plenty of opportunity. I guess the breeding happened sort of in the 60s and 70s. They developed these couple of breeds, like a Canadian Arcot and a Rito Arcot. And then the Dorset has been sort of, they've selected more maternal Dorsets, I suppose, so lacking less carcass and more, I guess more carcass than a Rito, but generally less carcass than what some of the terminals we'd see getting around these days, and a Dorset that we would have as a terminal. So sort of a maternal Dorset. So a lot of people had a cross of Dorsets and Ritos, like an F1 or a fixed composite with a few other breeds in there, which I thought they were good sheep. They were big sheep. I think one of the challenges in their industry will be kind of how to balance that. And the Rito sort of is that, like a small maternal that's highly fecund, and then hit it go over with a bigger terminal or whatever. But so I think there's opportunity there to, I guess, maybe be more efficient on some of that stuff. I think the big opportunities are around like the selection for coccidia resistance. I found one paper that was correlated with worm resistance, and so, but no one like assist counting and stuff to work out. Like there didn't seem to be, I don't know anyone in the world that's doing that, but I think that would be a game changer for that industry if we could find some selection sort of processes. They do. They have a pneumonia, progressive pneumonia problem, which is caused by Madi Visner, which is a virus, I assume. It's a major problem for them. So you get, but there is a gene test they've developed that's been developed for that, which I think, from what I can find, could be a bit effective. Like there's a couple of haplotypes that are very susceptible to that disease and some that are less so. Scrapie, they do a lot of testing for, or some people do a lot of testing for genetic resistance to scrapie. So a couple of gene tests which people are using to different levels, which have showing a bit of promise. And then, I guess like most industries, there's sort of some people trying pretty hard to measure stuff and using Genovis, which is their genetic evaluation system. Probably one of the challenges was that Genovis doesn't have heaps of traits. You can imagine maybe Sil and Lamplan 25 years ago or whatever, before a lot of the traits were developed, like some of the core traits are there, but at the scale the industry's at, it's difficult to invest in all the different, to develop new traits into those evaluation systems. So, but I think there's probably, I mean, there's the sort of comment was, if you go to 2,000 farms in Canada, you'll find 2,000 different production systems, which is kind of true, but then kind of isn't. Like there's sort of core similar things. I think around genetics, there's a bit of haphazard stuff going on. I use this ram this year and this one next year, and so I think probably opportunity to tidy that up a little bit through. I'm a bit of a fan of maternal sort of composites and some of the ones I saw there, like some of the combination of Rideau and Dorset, but then they'd put a bit of New Zealand composite in there as well, and a bit of New Zealand Cootworth in different places. So I think there is opportunity in there to probably to make sure that the genetics are tailored for the system. I think obviously you need a different ewe for a grazing system than you do for a barn system. I know I haven't done the modelling, but we need to do the modelling on how big mature size needs to be in those systems. It seems to be a lot of people are sort of running everything the same, whereas I don't know, I feel like there's an opportunity for a small number at that fecundity. Like you can turn over a lot of ewe lambs, so I think there's an opportunity to have a small number of maternals and then lots of animals going to terminals, which was something I was harping on a bit while I was there. But I think that'd be interesting to see how that rolls. There's no preg scanning for multiples there. There's preg scanning, but no one. I think the accuracy, from what I could tell, the accuracy wasn't sufficient with the local people to get accurate singles and twins, and a few people doing it themselves, that sort of stuff. So I don't know. I felt like that was a bit of to me, managing that level of energy and all that sort of stuff, and not knowing who's a single, twin, triplet would be a severe challenge. Obviously, not many singles in those highly fecund breeds, but having twins and triplets and in the same group, and then so I think that stuff was. I couldn't really get my head around how you could manage energy appropriately without, because I knew a lot of them were doing quite targeted breeding. Like they were really good with their short matings, and a lot of people using seeders in the off season and stuff. So they were probably they definitely were good at sort of synchronizing lambings and stuff. But then I feel like you get the full value out of that if you knew who was a twin, who was a triplet, and a few things like that. But that'd be, there's plenty of reasons why that's hard, I suppose. Like it's because of all those different lambings, and like your preg scan would be full time on the road, and while it's not quite the expanse of Australia, there is still plenty of area they would need to cover. So and for small groups, which would make it fairly difficult to sort the economics. So you can kind of see where the challenges are coming from.
Yeah.
The other thing I was keen to mention was probably at the convention we had lamb for the dinner, and then the next day we had like a pulled lamb shoulder, and without sounding offensive, it's not the best lamb I've ever eaten. And I kind of got, I guess reminded me that perception is everything, really. Like for a Canadian lamb eater, that was good lamb and was very tender. You could definitely taste, I could taste anyway, the ram taint, and it was quite fatty being corn fed. So it was a very different. Yeah, kind of almost if you didn't tell me it was lamb, I wouldn't have known what I was eating. And definitely the pulled lamb shoulder, it was definitely because of the fat cooked into the meat. You could definitely taste the ram taint, and which, it's not something that I enjoy, but obviously if you've grown up with that's the way it tastes, and that's fine. And a lot of the market in Canada are cultural lamb eaters, so from the Middle East or subcontinent or whatever, and particularly Middle East, where often they want entire animals and that's what they're used to eating, so that you can kind of see why that's how that rolls. But it certainly was a bit different and for me, and I guess it's interesting. Just you get used to eating it in a particular way and tasting a particular way, but I would struggle to. I can't imagine new lamb eaters, like who haven't eaten anything with ram taint, sort of tasting that and thinking it was amazing, but I don't know.
Well, I grew up not farming, and so whatever meat we got was probably cheap. And I didn't like lamb growing up. I thought it tasted horrible. My sister still really doesn't like it to this day, and it's probably because we were eating rams. We weren't eating the best stuff, and even like saying that, we're gap rated here, which is a global animal partnership, which means we don't castrate our ram lambs, and we send them over to America to go to Whole Foods. And I just dread to think who's trying lamb for the first time from Whole Foods, thinking they're buying a nice, expensive cut of fancy New Zealand meat, and it's an 8-month-old ram.
Yeah.
But we get the works are still taking it off us, and they want it. But as someone that picks a nice fat dry hogget with a long tail to eat,
yeah. And I think
testosterone.
yeah, definitely, and you kind of, there's intensive systems. You're probably 10% growth advantage from a ram versus a wether, so you can kind of. There's lots of reasons why you would do it, but I think, and I guess that. So there's that plus the corn fed versus grass fed. Like I think a lot of Australian lamb is feedlot finished, but it's been on. So it's a very pale meat, obviously very young meat, because it's killed early. So anyway, just different, and very tender though. Like, so no trouble there. Like, but anyway, it's just intriguing. Definitely.
I have, one more question. Well, no, not just one, but I should ask you what the last thing you changed your mind about was. But we'll get to that at the end. But you visited a sheep dairy, and that's my thing. And just thoughts and opinions. You mentioned clean points and the breeding of them and the redos and stuff.
Yeah, certainly clean pointed sheep. Vince and Heather are also doing a great job of that on their redos as well. So Heather does actually most of that breeding. I think Vince does all the feeding, but getting really made a lot of movement there. So that was interesting. But the sheep dairy was cool. So it's a sort of a relatively fledgling industry in Canada. So they've formed a co-op and doing good things. They've brought in the different people pronounce it differently, but Le Corn or whatever, the French dairy genetics, and which are clean points. I reckon, I don't know, they're a nice looking nice looking rams, clean points. They don't need to do any teat spraying or anything or teat dipping because there's no wool around the teats or whatever. And just a really, really good looking animal. Obviously high performance selected by the French for milk production. Doing all barn fed and mated and getting long. I don't know, like I haven't spent a lot of time in that industry, but getting quite long lactations and I think sort of over a kilo a day right through for a long lactation, a litre a day, which I think some of the Kiwi sort of versions I've heard here get down to quite low yields and lactation is not lasting that long, but obviously the corn would help with that. But mating while still lactating, sort of all sorts of stuff you need to do to keep things ticking over, finishing all their so bringing all males and females through as lambs and then onto milk powder robots and then onto creep and go and then fed through the production system. So it was.
It's amazing how productive people can be when land value is that high.
Yeah.
When you've got to make it work, you get
and certainly I think you can see that industry growing. Obviously, if sheep milk products are awesome, and so quite a few people are sort of starting to shift over to a dairy rather than to meat production. So the one I went to, I think it was maybe 16 aside herringbone, rapid exit sort of platform. So and obviously a lot of dairies are inside as well over there. So you went past some pretty fancy looking dairy barns. We didn't go into any of them, but did see an indoor beef feedlot. Which some of the fattest cattle I've ever seen. He was just grabbing. He was just trading, so he was sort of grabbing whatever was available at the sale yards, almost like just stuff that, and then bring them through in groups and feeding them. So sort of an opportunistic feeder, but really, really nice setup. A lot of focus on ventilation in those barns and making sure that the air movement is right, and so big fans and some fancy fancy sort of computer systems which shut the shutters down on one side if it's running from that angle and wind's coming this way, and so like fully computerized and high tech. Some of those barns. Others were like the bank barns, which is your kind of traditional put a barn on the side of a hill and put the feed upstairs and the animals downstairs. So they're quite. I don't know if I'd want to spend too much of my life working in one of them. They were quite dark and shady, and so obviously people do what they need to do, and obviously building a fancy $500,000 barn
they make it work. It's impressive.
Yeah, but I mean, just I guess the same as we encounter everywhere. They're just great people doing great things, and such a great opportunity to get to go in there and see those at that close level. And Aaron Morgan deserves a special mention for putting the hard yards in, for getting me around everywhere, and Anita O'Brien who was the instigator. And then there's a whole heap of crew and a whole heap of farmers that I met that was just an absolute pleasure. Got to go to my first ice hockey game, which was awesome. Had a fight. The local team won. That game is completely nuts. Like nothing else I've ever watched. But I got to enjoy that with Chris Moore and Lindsay Smith, which was a whole heap of fun as well. And Aaron which was fantastic. But it was. Yeah, I mean, the highlight shouldn't be going to a hockey game, but it was certainly up there to see that firsthand and just see how insane that game really is. So that was good fun.
Yeah. So we'll round it off by the question you ask everyone: what was the last thing you changed your mind about? And
I realise why I asked this question, because it's a really tough one to answer, and there's lots of I don't know. I probably thought that it would be so foreign and so different that what my experience would be less valuable there, I suppose. And but I guess what it showed was that the similar challenges, just sort of housed in different ways, I suppose. So and I guess I didn't have any real feel for those systems, and came away thinking, and probably thought, oh well, like outdoors is the best way and whatever, but whereas indoors done well is really efficient and really like it kind of made me think about, which I didn't expect to be thinking about, but it kind of made me think about, well, if and we had a client talk about this a while back, but if you can get cheap grain in Australia, why could you just put up a shed and do exactly the same thing? Like what's stopping us doing that? Like when we spend a lot of our time, and there'd be heaps of, I haven't done the economics, and maybe you do need $350 a lamb to make it work. But it's certainly you kind of had this theory that people were just doing it because that's the way they'd already done it and they hadn't thought about it. But it does make good sense if you've got a limited amount of land and you need to grow a maximum amount of feed on that and a maximum amount of energy, and then feed it through a production system. I think, so probably was challenged on those sort of things. Probably went there with the concept that 2 lambs is always plenty, like triplets is never going to be useful, whereas probably came away going that there are people that can, like under those systems, a lot of people take that weaker triplet off and feed it on a feeder, but a lot of those probably aren't taking those lambs right through on, so a lot of people working on half a bag of milk powder per lamb, and so that kind of improves the economics a fair bit rather than maybe a bag or whatever, depending on how long you leave them on there, but getting them on to creep quick. And I guess, probably my dislike for triplets and quads probably reduced a little bit, although it's still is challenging, but they can.
Triplets with creep, you can do it.
Yeah, and that's probably one thing. And then, probably, just a complete lack of appreciation for all of the importance of bedding and airflow and all that sort of stuff, like that whole new world.
This is music to my heart.
Yeah, like stuff that I've never, because we only ever, like they're in a shearing shed to get shorn and gone again or whatever. Or I mean, I've had animals indoors for my studies and stuff before, and so you see some of the same challenges. I was probably also blown away by, you didn't see a lot of, I don't know, like behavioural. Like, you see zoo animals that are rocking back and forth because they're not meant to be locked up or whatever. And the same with when you put sheep in pens, they start chewing wool and being silly because they're bored. But maybe because of a variation of feed or variation of system, or the fact that, I don't know, but you didn't seem to see many kind of behavioural issues or whatever where animals were just bored from being inside. Maybe that's because they were still in groups of 100 or whatever, or 50 or 100, like they weren't individually penned or whatever. So yeah, I don't know, like it's challenges what you think about, like I guess that you think about the sort of animal welfare type angle and like freedom to display normal behaviour, which they kind of were. Like they were being sheep. They were warm in a shed, not being chased by a coyote. So it wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't like welfare wise. I was
TMR.
Yeah.
Like the feed can keep sheep entertained for hours.
Yeah, that's right. And so
it's the right kind of.
Yeah, and they had there's people like Courtney who were doing great jobs of making sure the nutrition was right and the balance of fibre and energy and I guess most of them were either pregnant or lactating or whatever.
That'll do it as well. That'll keep them occupied.
Yeah, that's right. Barefoot and pregnant. But I think I don't know. So maybe I probably went away. I didn't know what to expect, but you kind of think, oh, this welfare wise, putting stuff in a barn is not perfect. But I don't know. I didn't see any cases where you I didn't see any sheep that didn't look happy. So it was it was good.
It's interesting to hear because for me, I don't have any of those. I don't have that Kiwi Australian thing to it, and I know part of me would assume that you wouldn't either because of your trials and stuff. But yeah, it is something that Kiwis and Australians do struggle to wrap their head around until you see it in person and see why. And the sheep are happy.
No, definitely.
And,
I think they made, and it's the same as a grazing enterprise. Like you see some really efficient ones, and you see some really inefficient ones, and like some of those barn systems that have been well thought out, really efficient ways to get stuff fed and get things done and get out of there fast. Like there's some, and then there's others that are kind of have evolved from a bank barn and a bit here and a bit there, which is just the way you have to. It's the same as we'd all love the best fences and the best farms and whatever, but you have to make do with what you got.
I'd say every one of those that do have the bank barn and are making do still have a very specific dream in their head of the exact shed that they would have if they could.
Yeah.
We all, And I always do find that interesting. It's an extra layer to sheep farming that we just don't have over here, and we're lucky for that. And maybe that's why we do get to focus on the genetics and stuff, because we don't have to think about feed rations for sheep. We don't have to think about ventilation. We have the freedom to...
Yeah, and that's right. And their level of, their average knowledge of nutrition would be a big step higher than what your average Australian Kiwi. Obviously we know how to manage pastures, but kind of don't know what their energy requirements are each day or whatever, whereas their ability to match feeds and think about what's going on is high. And again, there's some great support people out there helping them do that. But it was a good trip.
Good. That was wonderful.
Right, we'll wrap that up. Thanks for listening along. Thanks to all those Canadians that listen. I think on the stats there's about 50 or 60 of you. I think I met all of you. But if I go through names, I'll forget a few. So I'll try. I won't do that. But thanks to all those folks that were kind enough to host me, kind enough to come and say good day at the convention, and it was great to get to know you all. And as I've already said, make sure you look me up if you get anywhere near where we live, and we can certainly try and pay back the favour. Thanks again to Heineken, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Thank you to MNSD Animal Health and Norflex Livestock Intelligence. They offer an extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. We thank both of these companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.